Well, good afternoon, good evening. Not sure when you're tuning in. We're excited about you being here today. Now, let me set the record straight for some of you that are detailed people. This is being recorded on Wednesday in case some of you might be looking at me thinking, okay, you got the same shirt you had on yesterday. So this is being recorded. We did these back to back, and one that was shared last night and one being aired today. But no, I do not wear the same clothes all the time. I know that some of you are detailed people like that, so we want to clear the air in relationship to that. I want to ask you to turn your attention to John chapter 13. This is the evening that we would usually spend our time in the church fellowship hall for about an hour and 15 minutes, and just celebrating the Maundy service, the Last Supper, so to speak, and trying to set that mood and that atmosphere. And I've always been drawn to this story in John chapter 13 about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And what a great example of a servant, and the greatest servant that ever walked in two shoes. Behind me is a picture that a dear missionary friend of ours painted for us years ago. I was their pastor back in the 80s, first part of 1990s. And they went to South Africa, and they are still on foreign soil serving the Lord. All these years that they've been faithful, and as an administrator and as an artist, and there were so many different things that they could have done to be very rich individuals and pursue different professions, but yet they chose to serve the Lord. This is a picture of four boys that my friend took a photo shot of them, four boys on a dump in Mozambique. And this is where these little boys lived. She took the picture, she waited a little bit and went over and asked these young boys what they were praying for. Now, she figured that they were probably praying for clothes or food or something for themselves. But these boys are 9, 10 years of age, and they said that they were praying for a deeper walk with God. When I look at the life of our missionary friends and their service to the kingdom, and just this picture, every time I look at it, I think of them. It challenges my heart whenever I look at that picture, that I am so trifling at times and so consumed with myself that, and all of the material things that I need more in life, that I spend more time praying some little rinky-dink prayers for just some toy or trinket that's going to make me feel better about myself and about life, when I need to have the heart and the attitude of these four boys to say, oh God, I need a deeper walk with you, and I need to be more of a servant. And so I pray today that you'll be challenged as I've been challenged in these days. And just reading through this story just brings it home once again. That God's left us here, friends, not for ourselves, but He's left us here for a purpose. And His plan is to use you and I to minister to the people that we come in contact with. Exercising social distance. We can't get too close to them, but yet there's so many things that we can do to minister to people. And so I pray as we read through this story that your heart will be challenged. John chapter 13, verse 1. Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that this hour was come, that He should depart out of the world unto the Father, having loved His own which were in the world, He loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray Him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into His hands, and that He was come from God, and went to God, He riseth from supper, laid aside His garments, took a towel, and girded Himself. And after that He poureth water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith He was girded. Then cometh He to Simon Peter, and Peter said unto Him, Lord, dost Thou wash my feet? And Jesus answered and said unto him, What I do thou knowest not, but thou shalt know hereafter. And Peter saith unto Him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. And Jesus answered him, If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. And Simon Peter saith unto Him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. And Jesus saith to him, He that is washed needed not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit, and you're clean, but not all. For he knew who should betray him, therefore said unto him, You're not all clean. So after he had washed their feet, and had taken his garments, and was set down again, he said unto them, Know ye what I have done to you? You call me Master and Lord, and you say, Well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, you ought also to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you should do as I've done to you. And verily I say unto you, the servant is not greater than the Lord, neither he that is sent greater than he that sent him. And you know these things. Happy are you if you do them. And so it's important for you and I to follow the example of Christ. What is the definition of servant and being a servant? Somebody said this, frequently implying subjection without the idea of bondage. Now, let's face it, we're all great manipulators at times. Many times we have an agenda. Many times we utilize the avenue of supposedly serving one another where we can get people obligated to us or having a sense of indebtedness. That was never the motive of Jesus, because his motive was to be the living example in the very nature of God. And his desire was to serve people and not to get them under his spell or bring them into a sense of indebtedness to him. It's also one who ministers to or serves, but not in a menial, degrading capacity as a slave. And so may we understand that when we minister to people, it's just an opportunity to act like Jesus and to go to the length that Jesus did, and understanding that Jesus even washed the feet of his enemy, the one that was going to betray him. Why should we minister to people? Why should I be concerned about that person across the street or that person that lives in my home? Sometimes the hardest people to minister to are the ones that are the closest to you and serve. First of all, because of the example of Christ. The world asks, how many people work for you? But the Lord asks, how many people do you work for? Let me ask you that question today. How many people do you serve? The world thinks that happiness is the result of others serving us. But I can tell you this, real joy only comes when you and I serve other people as Christ did. Secondly, because exercise brings about Christ's likeness in our lives. When you and I begin to minister to people, it's an opportunity to be like Jesus and just to do for others as Jesus has done. He says that in the scripture, listen, what I've done to you, you likewise go out and do for others. I ask you a question today. When's the last time you took the towel in the basin and you washed somebody's feet? You washed that person that you would classify as an enemy or somebody that you can't stand. I remember my father-in-law was such a great servant. And he had a man in his church that opposed him on every level. Everything he went to do. Strong opposition, ran him down, talked about him. And I remember the story before my father-in-law passed away. He saw that man next door cutting his neighbor's grass. And my father-in-law went out in the yard and gave that man a glass of cold water and a towel to wipe his forehead. Now, that man that had opposed him and talked him down and been so hateful to him didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to respond. But in that moment, my friends, my father-in-law was acting like Jesus. And the challenge that comes to you and I, as we begin to minister to people on that level, and we take that towel and that basin and we begin to wash people's feet, and we exercise the example of Christ, we minister to people on levels that you and I could never match. And how are we to serve people? Well, we're to do it in a loving disposition. We all have enemies in life. But listen, I at times need to pray and say, God, give me love for that person. Help me to see them the way that you see them. Not to get angry and be resentful and mad and bitter at them, but having an avenue to minister to them in such a way that really wins their heart. Secondly, by doing good to others. In every opportunity that arises, we should be willing to help people. Let me ask you a question. How much do you help people? Are you one of these that says, well, I don't want to get involved, or I don't have time for it, or this is going to cost me something, and so I'm not going to do anything for them? But doing good for others is just an opportunity to be like Jesus. We do it not for our own personal merit, not thinking about what am I going to get out. Jesus never did that. He wasn't doing this for the disciples, thinking about what was going to be the return on it. He wanted to minister genuinely to their hearts and present himself as being a servant. You do it out of a spirit of humility. We're not to be puffed up or conceited. And sometimes, if you're like me, if I do something around the house, especially for my wife, I want to remind her of that from time to time, that I did thus and such, to get her praise, and maybe to use that as a sense of indebtedness to me because I did. No, I need to release all of that. I need to do those things in ministering to people and do it with a humble heart, considering the other person above myself. Matthew 10:24-25 said, the disciple is not above his master, nor the servant above his Lord. It is enough for the disciple that he be as his master and the servant as his Lord. Matthew 20:27, and whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant. Mark 9:35, and he sat down and called the 12 and saith unto them, if any man desire to be first, the same shall be last of all and servant of all. In Mark 10:44, and whosoever of you will be chiefest shall be servant of all. Next, it's knowing that my time is not my own. Just recognizing that there are going to be times that God's going to call upon you to do things that are going to push you out of your comfort zone, or going to challenge you just to be Jesus to somebody's life. You never know. Sometimes some of the smallest things that we do in ministering to people, how that'll open up an opportunity and a door to be able to witness to people. And it will be an opportunity for people to say, hey, there's something different about that guy, that he's willing to open up his heart and serve me. Knowing that my possessions are not my own. Listen, everything that you have, my Bible says in the book of Haggai, Haggai, I think that's right. Anyway, the Bible says that all the silver and gold is mine. God owns every single bit of it. God owns that boat you have. He owns that vehicle you have. He owns the property that you supposedly have. Everything belongs to him. And if that be the case, then God at times will want to use that to minister to people. And so it's an opportunity to recognize that what I classify as my possessions are not really my own. Next, it's a way to for God to be glorified in and through you. I have a doctor friend of mine that I really appreciate and care much for him when I go to see him. I've learned over the years that doctors and lawyers and people that are higher up in professions, that they have needs just like everybody else does. And I've learned one of the greatest things that I can do for my doctor in serving him is just praying with him. And most every time I go to see him, I say, Doc, let me pray for you before I go. And that has put such a bond between the two of us that he knows I'm not there just to get something out of him, but it's an opportunity for me to serve him in a capacity and recognizing that he has needs in his life and that he has problems and difficulties and hardships. He's an extremely intelligent man, and his mind and brain can run circles around mine. But I know in those moments when I pray for him that means something to him, and he appreciates that. And last of all, learning to deflect praise. Listen, friends, if it wasn't for Jesus, we'd all be in hell. The reason why we're still here on planet Earth, that God's not finished his work in you and I, and he's still wanting to do more, and he's wanting to use us in a spirit of humility to minister to people and be a blessing to people, just as Jesus did with these disciples, and even with his enemy, the one that was going to betray him. He took that basin of water, that towel, and got before them and bent on bended knee, and began to wash the dirt off of their feet. He wasn't doing it for himself. He wasn't doing it for self-gratification or to see his name being put in lights, but he was doing it to fulfill the will of God and to portray himself as being a servant. And I challenge you today with these words that you would go out and find somebody that you can minister to. You might not have even go outside your home. It could be somebody there in your home that definitely needs to see you showing forth an attitude of service and just ministering to people. Sometimes, as I said earlier, that's the hardest place to do it. But I pray that you will put this into practice, and as you and I open up our hearts to the Lord to be used of him in ministering to people, may God give us a platform to be able to share Christ with people. Thank you for tuning in this evening. I pray that you have a wonderful evening, and we appreciate you so much and praying for you and believing God to meet your needs and encourage you in your hearts through this time. God bless you.